Cumberland area schools, and so been working with NoBully.org and Jennifer here today and tonight, and she'll be working again tomorrow. She was with us earlier this school year working with teachers, and we really started working with the organization last spring, and so this is going to be probably a multi-year relationship, we hope. But we knew that we needed to do some work at the secondary level with this area of anti-bullying and bullying prevention. We know that we've had a tragic incident in our community, and she is aware of the incident of the student losing his life. And so we wanted to be upfront with her when she came to present tonight that we have some very serious concerns. And so she has been excellent with our high school staff today. We are recording her because we'd like to post that. So we are not recording anyone in the audience. If you have a question that you want to ask and you don't want your voice on the recording, Max can take that out, and you just need to let us know at the end. Or you can write the question down and Jennifer can simply read that. But we wanted to record her parent presentation. We know that people are busy and coming out is always difficult, and so we'd like to be able to share that with the community. So this is her. She comes to us from Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. That was hard to get out. With an organization called NoBully.org. They've been around about 15 years, and so I just want to welcome. Her name is Jennifer Revort.
Yep, that's right.
Say that correctly. So without further ado, we're going to get going. So thank you, please, for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for coming out on a Thursday night. And I am really looking forward to getting to hear from all of you and learn more about Albert Lea and the school you have here. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the staff and to really talk with folks about what their struggles are and what they're excited about and what they're learning to do. And I can't wait to hear from you as well. So this is a tough presentation. In the best of times, because it talks about hard topics. And so topics that we all talk about, think of as very, very personal. And so I'm going to invite you to take a moment if you need to. If it gets to be too much and we're talking about something that's too close, feel free to take a break, take a walk, take a deep breath. I will not be offended if you have to take a walk. It's really hard for us to talk about this. I'd also like for you to feel free to ask general questions of me about the topic here, and that's going to be what NoBully's approach to ending bullying is. So you have to stick with me to learn a little bit of how we do this, and I'll talk to you about what your school's already learned to do and is working on. This is fairly new for the district, and so there's a learning curve that they're all working on, and I'll really try and walk through that with you. Then the second part of this presentation is all what we're asking, NoBully is asking of parents across the country to do to help support their children and community to sort of be the other piece of this pie. So how can we all be constructive together? So I invite you to give it a shot, listen openly to this, and then we can ask personal questions at the end, or some of the more difficult questions we'll sort of share after we've seen the whole story. You good with that? Okay, I got a lot of head nods. I really appreciate it. I think it'll really be a way to make sure you hear everything. So I come to NoBully from Philadelphia, and I've spent my career working in youth leadership and youth voice in lots of out-of-school time spaces. So I love working with families. I love working in museums, in after-school programs, in places where kids do a lot of projects. And I work with a team of folks who all have a different expertise. So we have a great staff who spent their whole career in Oakland, California, working on restorative practices for gang violence. And another team member who works only on gender identity. So there's lots of different things that we all bring to NoBully. And that means I have a whole deep bench that I can pull from when we get stuck. And so if we get stuck tonight, I'm going to go back to my bench, I'm going to ask those questions, and then bring it back to you. Okay? So today's presentation, NoBully's a nonprofit. I think that's really important to know. They're in San Francisco, but we're all over the country. And we are currently funded by ESPN and Major League Baseball. They are invested in ending bullying as well and have sent us all around the country for, this year and last year. We were in Minnesota these 2 years. Today, like I said, the first thing we'll do is define bullying. And I want to make a real effort today to separate bullying out from all the other things that affect kids. They're all mixed together in real life. But in this case, we're going to try to talk about bullying and the definition because words matter. And when you come to the school and ask about something, we want to make sure we're all using the same language. Then we'll talk about what we know causes bullying in the research and how NoBully addresses it. And we do something called a solution team, and I'll show you a video of that. And then finally, how can you support your child no matter what they're going through and exactly where they fall on this spectrum. So, what do you think is the best predictor of your child's success in their life? Throw out some guesses.
School.
Academic performance, school. Okay, good. Social emotional health. Okay, do you want to kind of put that in layman's term for a few other folks here?
How they get along with other children, parents, and teachers.
Yep, how they get along with other people, how they regulate their emotions. Yep. What else?
Being respectful.
Yeah, ability to be respectful, different opinions, things like that. Great. Being in a positive environment. Good. So these are all critical elements. For the sake of this presentation, we've boiled down a whole lot of research, and the way we talk about it is the ability to make and keep a few close friends. That's it. You don't need 400 Facebook friends, and you don't need very many friends, just one close relationship, 2 close relationships. The good thing about that is that we all have the power to do a lot about that, right? As parents, you don't have to have a PhD to be able to help kids make friends. We have a lot of power over how to help build relationships, how to help them move forward. Now, that is not to say that because you have one good friend, you're going to be a millionaire. We have not defined success in terms of financial success here. Let me be really super clear. So, oh, whoops, went too far. We talk about bullying as related to well-being. So does anybody know who this guy is? Maslow, Abraham Maslow? I see some nodding heads. You guys are awesome. Typically in the parent presentation, nobody knows who this guy is, but he's an old guy. He's not around anymore, but he came up with this really great triangle. And what this triangle says is you have to meet your basic needs before you can become the best you are. So you have to have food to eat and a place to live. That's your physiological. You also need to feel safe. So if your life is threatened, it's very difficult to move up on the triangle. You have to feel like you're part of a community. You're connected to maybe 1 or 2 other people, but you have a connection. And that is really important because humans are social beings. And so we thrive when we have a connection, and things start to fall apart on us when we're isolated. And so it's really critical that we think about, for young people, how to connect them. Then you get into, once you have safety and belonging, you can move into knowing who you are and feeling good about yourself and understanding where you fit in the world, how you matter to things. Once you know that, then you can really take action and meet your best potential. So where do kids who are bullied or people who are bullied get stuck? What is the level they get stuck on? Safety and belonging. Depends what's happening, but you're absolutely right. We share this triangle because we want you to know that if you're stuck at safety and belonging, you can't move towards academic learning. So often when kids are being bullied, you'll see their grades slip, right? Because they're actually unable to move past that and take in new content. Now, all the information I'm sharing with you, we've been sharing with your school and educating your teachers around this as well. It's important for all the staff to learn this information as well. We know historically at the secondary level, there's less information out there for educators to get, and they're learning this now. So they're on the same growing area as you. I mentioned it already in the beginning, but this is the spot where I'm supposed to stop and say, take a breath, take a break if you need it. So let's think about how students bully. Is this bullying? No, yes, lots of different answers here. Well, what will we need to know?
Is this a one-time thing?
Yeah, we need to know more about what's happening. So what we've worked really hard with everybody that we're talking to is to put on your detective hat. And as parents, you guys are going to be amazing detectives because you know your kids the best. So get those detective hats on and we're going to figure out what we know. We need to understand the context because maybe they're just having a disagreement about something. Maybe it's an elaborate pantomime. Maybe it's just a conflict, right? So if it is bullying, it's probably physical bullying. Now, if it's bullying, it means it's repeated and there's a power difference. So it's perceived power. Somebody has more power than another person, okay? And we'll keep talking about that. These are the things that count as physical bullying. And I think the one to point out is that stealing things from someone would be in the category of physical bullying. How else do students bully?
Verbally.
Yeah, verbally. And what would be in the verbal bullying category?
Making fun of how they might be dressed.
Yep, good.
Their hairstyle.
Good. All these things, and the one that's surprising here is spitting. Counts as verbal bullying. Again, you can have a verbal conflict. So if it's a one-time thing or they're just having an argument, that is a verbal conflict. What makes it verbal bullying is that someone has perceived more power than another person, and so they're using it for some kind of control, and it's repeated. Okay? So when you call the school to say that there's a disagreement or there's a problem that my child's having, you want to be crystal clear. This has happened how many times? What exactly is happening? So making sure that that's really clear for everybody. One that's close to verbal bullying is relational bullying. This is trickier and really big in middle and high school. It happens for both boys and girls. You see this sort of power struggle that's really developmentally appropriate. It's not appropriate to be bullying, but it is appropriate for kids to be thinking about where they fit into a group, right? Part of being in middle and high school is to figure out where you sit in the world and who your friends are and how you have power. And so as kids struggle with this attempt to find power, sometimes they sort of bleed into getting it in a negative way. And we want to really work with them to figure out how to get it in a more positive way. Cyberbullying. What do you guys know about cyberbullying? Where does that happen? Yes, online. So the interesting thing about cyberbullying is that unlike all the other kinds of bullying, it only has to happen one time. Why is that? Yeah, there's no way to control the spread of this thing. You can instantly text 20 people. Now it's already automatically repeated, right? It just kind of goes on its own. So we're working hard to educate kids that the stakes are a little bit higher for cyberbullying than anything else. These things all count as cyberbullying. And this happens in a lot of different places. Where are places that you think of when you think of cyberbullying? Online. What places? Facebook, social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat.
Email.
Now we're getting to real adult things, but yes, email. There are some other places. So gaming is a really big area for us to watch now, because we have this awesome opportunity for kids to play games together and be social online virtually. But unfortunately, when there's a cyberbullying issue, it can happen in the gaming sites as well. And so we need to be extra vigilant around that. As parents, this is the area we need the most help with universally. Because this is the spot where what happens in a cyber situation comes to school. Right? It comes to school the next day, and we don't necessarily, your school doesn't know about it, or you don't know about it, and we're all finding out after the fact. So the more you can work with your young people, and I know your school's working on figuring out how to be a great digital citizen to avoid interacting in this way, but but it is really, really tricky. And the more we can work on where your kids are online, understanding how to check in with them, really, really critical elements. On your handout, you have a resource on the back side of your handout, and it talks about a website called commonsensemedia.org. How many of you have been on that? Okay, if you haven't, go tonight. It's going to be amazing. And I'm telling you that because it tells you where your kids are online. When they're like, oh, I'm on this new thing called Snapchat. And you're like, what the heck is Snapchat? You don't have to get on Snapchat to learn. You can just go to commonsensemedia.org and it will tell you everything you need to know about Snapchat. That gives you ideas on where you can have parental control on any of these tools. It does stuff even around movies, like is this appropriate movie for my kid to watch? It also has lesson plans that your teachers can access, or you can access in out of school time programs. So really jump on the computer and check it out. Questions about that? I don't know. I can find out. They're renowned, though, experts in this. There's a lot of good resources. This one is the most accessible because it translates well into Spanish. So it's not like just the Google Translate. It's actually a bilingual site. It stays really up to date. It's parent informed and really well researched. So that's why we picked that one. There are lots of other places to get good stuff, but that's our favorite right now. We can't say this enough. Bullying is a power struggle between kids. And so our goal when we're trying to end bullying is to help targets take their power back. We want to give them the opportunity to take it back so they sort of heal from the experience. And for the bully, how do they gain power and respect without taking it from someone else? That's the whole idea here. And when you start thinking about it in this way, instead of in a super punitive way, we have a lot of potential for improving things. We spend time defining bullying and saying that it's different than conflict because the way you resolve bullying is different than the way you resolve conflict. So a conflict could even be a physical assault. You could get in a really big fight. But if it's a conflict, the kids have perceived equal power, and it's not something that's happening over and over again. Like they wanted to go to the different movies and they couldn't agree and it turned into a fist fight. That's a conflict. How is it appropriate to work through that?
Talk about it.
Yeah, with some mediation, you might be able to figure out, let's talk about it, and maybe we go to a different movie, right? That's super, super helpful. And we want kids to gain those skills to be able to have peer mediation and to come up with problem solving, because they're going to need those things to remember, keep those friends, right? If we have a bullying situation, we can't use the same strategy. Because if you have the target and the bully face-to-face, what happens? And there's the power difference. What happens?
One being bullied shuts down.
Yeah, so you put them in a position where the child who has been targeted is getting actually re-traumatized here. Does that make sense? This is really, really hard for everybody to negotiate. And so we are practicing understanding how to be that detective and make sure we're not identifying things that are bullying as conflict, and we're not identifying conflict as bullying, right? So we're all working on this, and we're going to keep practicing these definitions to make sure your kids are getting the right services. Okay, I'm actually going to keep us moving a little bit. The only thing I wanted to say about this is a worldwide challenge, and one that's not unique just to Minnesota. So realize that we have 20% of kids who are report being bullied, and we know it's underreported. So we know this is a big deal. We all remember that we were sort of involved in this in our past lives as children, potentially with a workplace bullying situation, right? This doesn't go away just because we're adults. But there's things we can do, and we're about to move to that. The other thing to note, as communities change, bullying targets difference, right? It's a way to grab power. And so if your child is going to get stuck in the role of the bully, they're going to look for something that is a weakness or something that's unique about somebody else. Because remember, this is this whole idea about grouping and kids finding a leadership space in a group. So here are things that are typically targeted statistically around, so kids who fall in any different category than the whole around race, religion, sexual orientation. These are critical categories your school's on the lookout for supporting, because we need to make sure that these aren't violated. And unfortunately, if any of these are violated by another student, these actually qualifies as harassment, and your school follows a different policy other than any of the things we're talking about. Okay, I'm gonna pause because we're about to let you guys talk to each other for a minute. Any questions at this point about the definitions? I know I rushed through it a little bit, but we'll start to play around with how to negotiate that as we go. If you have questions, jump in. So, yes?
I was just going to say, I think a lot of that has to do with self-esteem for a child or for a young adult coming up. I think that plays a big, huge role, and I think that's where they lose power, is because they don't have any. Their self-esteem is, they have none, So I guess as a parent, we should probably just build it up or put them in activities. I'm not saying so much as like a self-defense class. A self-defense class teaches them discipline, respect for others, and gives them a huge fatigue.
So what I like about what you said, and is that you're already strategizing about how to add resilient factors to young people. That's awesome, and that's someplace we all have a toolkit at our disposal, right? So in your case, if somebody's feeling less than confident or isn't seeing themselves as as great as they are, think about how to build that up, and I think that's right on. I think that's not the only reason that kids get targeted. They get targeted for a lot of reasons, and we want to make sure that they do have enough resilient factors so that they can withstand a little bit of things of conflict. We definitely don't want to permit bullying, and we're working really hard to help kids who are stuck in the role of bullying. Remember, bullying ends up being a defense mechanism for kids as well. So we're going to help them work on getting out of that way to grab power and find another way. A lot of the same ways that you would do it for somebody targeted, you'd do it for somebody who's being bullied, actually. So some just really good stuff you can do to help kids. And I love that you brought those up.
They would have in their own self, they're able to talk to their bully, or hey, what's going on, what's your problem with me, instead of, kind of shying away and walking away.
So that's really appropriate in a conflict. It's not really appropriate to expect a child who's being bullied to be able to solve it on their own. I love that you said have them stop and walk and say stop and walk away, or have them say stop to the bully. That's great. It helps them gain power. But in most cases, that puts too much pressure on the child targeted. And so what we'll work on is how do we put a team around each kid who's being targeted so that they can do that with support. Does that make sense? You're going to see what happens in just a second when we ask kids to do this on their own, or we ask kids to do this after punishments. And just give me 2 seconds to get there, okay? I want you guys to talk for a moment. These are my 3 questions. You can pick your favorite one, because we probably could go on these questions for a while. The questions are, what helps you as a parent, and what strategies do you use when you have strong feelings about what your child is going through? This is that when your mama bear instinct or papa bear instinct pops on, how do you keep that in check in order to help your kid? That's really, really hard, and that's why we're asking it. Then the second question, have you personally responded to a bullying situation? What did you say or do that helped or made it worse? And then what signs might you look for in your child as related to bullying? You're going to find a partner and share the answers to one of these questions with each other. Okay, you can get a group of 4 if you'd like. Just kind of cluster up. Okay? You good? Why don't you guys cluster? You look like you're a cluster. This looks like a good cluster. Hello. You're going to cluster up? Oh, okay. You don't want to be in this conversation. All right. You good? Hi. Good to see you again. Nice to see you guys again. Let's see. This team's all right. Thank you for sharing with your neighbors and community members. So tell me a little bit. Did anybody hear a great strategy from a neighbor or a fellow family member about what to do when that mama or papa or grandparent bear comes out? What are some really great strategies you heard that others might be able to steal?
I find when I stay calm and almost undertone of calmness, they are more likely to share. They see I'm getting upset about what they're telling me, then they don't share.
Okay, so just, I'm going to repeat it because it's hard to hear you. Staying sort of almost magnified calm so that they can share. Otherwise, if you get upset, they'll shut down or stop talking because they don't want to upset you. Excellent. Other strategies. For those of you who have no ability to turn the calm button on, what do you do?
I think just being real with your kids, just not being around the bush, just being straight with them. It's like, hey, you know what's going on. This way, they're able to be open with you instead of closing that door and cutting you off.
Yeah, so it sounds to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying sort of consistently be open with them and straight with them so they know that you can hear them and come to you when you have a problem.
Yeah, this way you build that trust factor, not only with them, but them with you.
Great, thank you. And then how about some strategies you've used when responding to a bullying situation? What helped or made it worse?
Going to the principal and they set them in front of the other one, in front of each other.
That's what you did?
We went to the principal and
And that's what the strategy was. Okay. And so that didn't help?
No.
Right. Okay. So that may have been misidentified. Go ahead.
Forever ago, I think I learned as a young child that a child always wants to go to that parent and make sure that you're always there for them. So I don't know if that's still true when you have middle-aged or high school students, but I still kind of hold on to that. So the first thing I always do is just listen. So they pour their heart out and, victim, 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 yes, you poor thing. And I listen to all of those things. And then I ask, they're not going to maybe tell what they contributed to in the situation. So then I try to ask questions around, what was your role in this and what did you do? And then again, always let them know that I'm their parent, I'm their advocate, I'll always be there for them, but then maybe kind of shifting then to their role in the situation, what they could have done better.
Great. Excellent. So what I really like that you pointed out is that your young person still needs you no matter how old they are. And you are their most important person, likely their entire lives. But parents sometimes forget that or feel like maybe not the same in high school or middle school because the relationship gets strained. Believe me, you are absolutely critical to your child's success at every stage, especially when they're really struggling in middle and high school, especially if they're pushing back against some parameters you've set. So that's great. And then you started to strategize on how you'd have a conversation with your young person around really hearing, digging deeper and having a little bit of a detective hat on, and then sort of teasing out whether there was anything that they contributed to. Is the story bigger than what I'm hearing already? That's great. And then I'm going to just keep us going. I know you have a lot of great expertise, but what signs might you look for in your child as related to bullying?
Just a change in their behavior.
Change in the behavior, like what?
Shutting down,
Potentially shutting down, okay?
overeating out.
Yep. Okay, what do they take into their body? Overeating, substance abuse, things like that. What else could happen?
Isolation.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start and imagine that this is a continuum. And I'm in the middle here. And I am a child with a lot of resilient factors. And I have a really supportive family. I have a great relationship with my faith-based institution. I have an awesome teacher at school. I get good grades. I have a lot of supportive factor that are going for me, right? I'm in the middle of this continuum, and a child in this place may be able to sustain 1 or 2 incidences of bullying. We never want anybody to have to do that, but because they have all these friends and resilient factors, they're going to sort of be more likely to be okay, right? And then when we move to internalizing or externalizing, these are the 2 things that happen when we're bullied. You guys were mentioning a lot of things you notice about kids who are internalizing bullying, the withdrawal, the isolation, all those things are on this side of the continuum. What happens when a child starts externalizing bullying? What would you look for?
Start finding the weaker person and continuing.
They may step into the role of being the bully, right? And so now we have a very complicated situation because the child who was being targeted is now targeting someone else. They've found a way to get power back. It's just a negative way, right? So it's a coping strategy. It's not the one we want to support, but we have to acknowledge that it is something to keep them here. And then where is this going? A lot of this is at school. They're acting out. They're being really disruptive, maybe getting kicked out of class, right? Relationships are getting frayed. And then all the way down here, in the most extreme cases, this is where you actually have school shootings. So we have a continuum that goes both ways. And what our job is to do what this gentleman up here suggested, is to figure out how do we pull resilient factors onto our kids so they stay as close to the middle as we can. And that's for kids who are being targeted and kids who've been stuck in the role of being bullied. And so we're going to talk about how to do that right now. I know what causes bullying. Phew. Right? This kid. He does it, right? Right? If we kick this kid out, everything's fine.
No.
Why not? What happens if Joey leaves school here?
Maybe solve a problem for one person, but not for everybody else.
Why?
Because just because he's bullying somebody else's kid doesn't mean that people he's bullying is bullying other people.
So that's still an individual. I'm going to push you because he was suggesting that if Joey leaves, it just solves one kid's problem because there's other bullies. And I'm going to push you to say, actually, it's not only Joey by himself, because if we know we move Joey into another space with more supports and a different kind of environment and a fresh new start, Joey will be super successful. He can have a complete turnaround, because what's creating the space for Joey is he's finding a way to get power and leadership from this behavior. And he's inside a system. So all of us are actually part of the system that allows bullying to happen. This is a lot to get your head around. But it means that we have a lot of power, once again, in helping to end it. So if a child is bullying, and they bully someone, and the kid who's the bystander does nothing, what is that saying to the bully? Keep doing it. This is funny. This is what we accept in our school, right? So the most powerful thing to do would be for that child to stand up and say, this is not okay, and get help, right? So we're going to give kids strategies around how to do that, because that takes the bully's power away. What happens when let's jump to you guys, because you're here in the room. How does a family collude with a bully? That's what it's called. How does a family say, it's okay to keep bullying? Potentially for modeling it, right? So kids often look to what's happening at home. That's not the only way. Well, how else? So I would put television as like culture, right? That's sort of the larger media of things that we know you can get power from some cruelty. That's a little trickier and a lot vaguer. They need a lot of help. Use that common sense media again, negotiating values from TV. But if we look to families, how else?
How the parents treat other people.
That's, yep, and that would be modeling. Excellent. I'd also say, in some cases, families want to protect their child and have their back at the expense of their own child, right? So if you are in a situation where you've been told that your child is bullying, if you can't hear it or accept it and figure out how to strategize around it, your child learns, hey, it's okay, right? And so we have to figure out how to protect our kids without inadvertently adding to this system. It's really tricky, right? And then we're working with the schools to make sure they have those detective hats on, because when something happens in front of a teacher and they don't do anything or say anything and be an upstander, then they're also adding to this system, right? So we're really working hard with everybody to say, when you see it, stop it, right? So your school has learned some strategies for doing that I'm about to show you. But right now, here's what we do to stop bullying. Across the country, this is not just Albert Lea, and actually Albert Lea is working hard not to only do this. When your kid is being bullied, the first thing you want to do as a parent is to do what? You want some retribution, right? I'm out for blood if something's happening to my kid. And that's sort of a natural instinct that I have to sort of pull myself back from and say, okay, how is this sort of building a community here? Because right now, if we punish the child who is being bullied, which will continue to happen, but if we only punish that child, what happens to the target?
It just gets worse because the bully continues on.
Yeah, so the target gets hurt more, right? We have this really stuck situation where adults are trying to help, but there's this power difference, and we haven't resolved that. And so we have this thing called snitches get stitches, right? This is where this comes from, because then the target it pays for it later. And that's why bullying is underreported. So although there needs to be consequences, and your school will continue to deliver consequences, I'm really clear about that, they're adding to the toolbox so we can do more than just punish, but instead restore relationships. Here's how. The first thing you're going to see happening, and you'll start to hear about, is this social vision statement. And you're going to get asked what input you have. We want to have a vision for where we're heading as a school community. And that vision is going to be, how do we all want to treat each other here? We're going to obsess about this sentence. And there'll be activities planned about this sentence. We're going to completely work on random acts of kindness. There will be notes coming home when your child's observed doing something great. There will be all sorts of focus on kindness and empathy and being nice. It sounds fluffy, but what it does is it helps young people understand how else to be. What else is out there for me? Does that make sense? And so once we have that, your teachers are also practicing, they've already been practicing, it's going to get more widespread, interrupting any sign of pre-bullying or disrespect they notice. They're going to have those detective hats on, and as they walk through the hall, if they see somebody give a little nudge, they're going to say, hey, I noticed what you just did to him. It looked like it was meant to hurt him. Here at Albert Lea, we're kind to each other. And then we're going to move on. And what started as that little nudge, but normally would have evolved into something gigantic, has been cut off at the knees, and we have de-escalated the situation. Once that's happening widespread around the school, we'll maybe have a few hot spots, and that'll be space for a solution team. The solution team is a restorative practice that happens after consequences have already been delivered by a completely separate adult who works with the child who is stuck in the role of bullying and the more positive adults, positive peers, to come up with a solution. I'm going to show you a video of it. Once that happens, you're going to see all those hot spots disappear. This, when it's implemented with fidelity, has a 90% success rate. You're going to see a huge difference in your school. And then finally, if something persists and it ends up being this widespread phrase that's inappropriate, in a lot of cases it might be something like gay calling, that's so gay, you're so gay, which is something meant to be hurtful, it's inappropriate for kids to say. The school will work at that at the class level and do classes on how to stop that. A lot of the classrooms have already worked on definitions. What is bullying versus conflict? So we can all have the same page. Those are things that are happening already. Okay, questions about that before I show you the video? Okay, so this is a 7-minute video, and I want you to look for who the child is stuck in the role of the bully, okay? Actually, so, yeah, we're good. Is that clock right? Do you know?
Yes.
Yeah, good, okay.
Don't you know?
So, who was the bully in that situation? The child stuck in the role of bully. Could you tell?
Yeah, she was part of the solution team.
What?
She was part of the solution.
Right, she's the blonde in the solution team, right? And so it's really critical to see, did you see how it worked? The trick here is thinking about the idea that kids have a lot of leadership capacity, right? And using that to the place where in almost all cases, the young people will be compelled to pull the group they're in, right? And they'll start to say, well, this is the way to lead in this space. And now we've shifted, how do I get my power? I get my power from positive pro-social behavior. And what happens is the young people actually do that to each other, right? So you have a child stuck in the role of the bully, a couple of the bully followers, and then we have kids who are either the target's friends and allies, if they have them, and usually a couple of kids who always do the right thing, right? And that dynamic with a coach can really create some really positive, awesome stuff over a course of about 3 weeks. And so this is a restorative process that builds the toolkit. It won't happen for everything, but it will happen for those hot spots. Your teachers are not doing this yet because they haven't learned it yet. They will learn it tomorrow with me. It's a big 6-hour training. And then we've got to give them a little bit of time to ramp up and practice. So they'll start with some of the easier things, right? Things like what we saw here was not a really, really hard situation. This does work in more severe situations, but we will do this in conjunction with other interventions as well. Does that make sense? Let me be really clear. This is not in place of discipline. Discipline will continue. If your child is being targeted, it will not happen unless your target gives permission. Why don't we do a solution team unless the target gives permission? For the main reason that our primary purpose is to help the target get their power back. And that means it needs to be their decision to help solve this problem, right? This is the healing. This is absolutely critical in this method. This is done for a target, and it has the added benefit of helping a child who's stuck in the role of the bully. But the primary purpose is for the health and the benefit of the target. And the health and benefit of the other students who are learning how to be more pro-social. Does that make sense? Because now they build their toolkit so that when they see something happening, they know how to step in and how to change it. So they don't sit there uncomfortably and laugh or follow along. Okay? It's really a different mind shift. And it takes a little bit of practice. That's what your school is working on. Here's how we need your help. Parents are an absolute essential piece of this community and connecting to us all to the whole parts of the story. We know that there are less opportunities for kids to get a break in a safe space than there used to be. So in the case of cyberbullying, something that happens at school sticks around and then 24 hours is still dealing with it in the evening and at 2 in the morning, right? It's very hard for us to break the cycle, give kids some perspective, to take a breath and take a break. And so we really need your help as part of the school and just as part of your child's life to help them move through these very high emotional situations. And our suggestion for that is to do 2 things. We call it leading with the left hand of empathy and the right hand of action. So when you're leading with the left hand of empathy, you're listening first and you're hearing the emotion in what's happening. Remember, if your child is being targeted, you want to make sure you give them the opportunity to be heard and seen. One of the most damaging things about being bullied is you might feel powerless and invisible. So it's critically important that you see your child, right? Even 1 or 2 people can make a huge difference here. So empathy doesn't just mean, oh, I remember feeling like that. Or it means, is this how you're feeling? It looks like you are. Can you tell me more, right? drawing those questions out. And then really trying to listen to hear versus listening to speak. That's hard for parents. How many of you just want to jump in and solve it? I do. Yeah. We know how to solve things, right? When we, let me see what the slide says here. Okay. So we lead with the left hand of empathy. The right hand of action does not just mean list our set of things. It doesn't mean, I'm going to go call the school now. Sit there, right? It doesn't mean, it might mean that, but it doesn't always mean that. How would you problem solve with your child to move through a situation? What kinds of stuff would you do? It's not a clear question. So for example, when I hear something's happening, we're going to go through a couple scenarios in a moment, I might have the impulse to say, first you'll go do this, then we'll do this, then we'll do this. What we want to do is give that power back to your young person. So we want to problem solve with them. What do you think you're capable of doing? How might we move towards a solution here? What do you think you can do? What scares you about doing that, right? Those kinds of questions. It's all, like you said, having your child's back. But it's really a critical process to do both of those things. The other thing you really want to do is breathe. Because the last thing you're going to want to do is stay calm in these situations. And it can be really, really helpful because there's research that shows out of the Heart Math Institute that you're the weather vane in your family. So if it has to do with proximity, and I'm going to do a really rough job of explaining it. And I would say go to Heart Math Institute if you want to know more. But if the two of us are close together, and I'm really amped up, how is she going to start to feel? Really amped up, right? And so we actually have research that shows that just by being near each other, that our heartbeats will start to align, right? And our breathing, rate of respiration will start to align at a minimal level. It's not like you're going to be suddenly like, see, you're all calm because I did that. But it'll be enough, right? It's enough. Any little bit helps. So if you can calm yourself down, you can start to lower the anxiety in the space. And so that's why that's so important. It also gives you a minute to stall. It's okay to take the moment you need before you jump into a hard situation with your young child. I'm not going to have us count off because of time, and I want to make sure you have time to ask questions because I put you on hold. What I would like to do is problem solve a few of these things, left hand of empathy, right hand of action. So your son Darius complains of headaches in the morning and refuses to go to school. You learn that boys in his grade have been calling him a retard and accidentally bumping into him while playing basketball. You tell Darius to stand up for himself and hit any kid that bullies him. But today the principal calls to tell you that Darius hasn't been involved in a fight with another boy. How would you coach your son through this? Using the left hand of empathy, the right hand of action. What are you going to do with that left hand of empathy first?
I'm going to listen without speaking.
Okay, listen. If your child's open to start talking, you're going to listen first. Yep. What else?
I think sometimes that might be like the last case scenario, because I'll be straight up with you. I think sometimes that's going to happen.
You're counseling the child to hit another child, you mean?
No, what I'm saying is that might
Yeah.
be the last case scenario because they might say, well, you talk to them, you listen to them, hey, just ignore them. And they might be ignored, but then they might get teased, they might get, and so on and so on and so on to, whereas it escalates where the kid can't take it anymore.
Right.
And that's got to be like the last.
So it's a scenario for a reason, right? It's a scenario because we know a lot of parents counsel their kids this way. But what's the challenge with counseling your child to hit another child?
You're teaching them it's okay to hit.
Right. We're actually moving them along this spectrum again, right? Right, where we're teaching a kind of resilience, although it's not a kind of resilience which will lead to healthy outcomes for either the child doing it or the other. Now, we counsel ourselves, we counsel kids to do that when we feel like we don't have a big enough toolbox, right? If we have, like you said, it's a last case scenario. And what I want us to do is build a bigger toolbox so we really don't have to get to that. Because we know it's not as effective. And we know that if we counsel violence, what's going to happen is the stakes are very high for young people right now, particularly kids of color, right? We cannot counsel people to hit other people and expect that they won't have repercussions that affect them for years to come, especially at the high school level, right? We have to be very, very careful about that. And I understand that we feel like there's nothing else, and that's why I'm here. We're going to strategize. So, because Darius has already gotten in trouble, and now you have to talk to your son when you told him to hit the kid, what will you do?
Own up that you're partly blind.
Yeah, I think it might be really cool to consider saying, hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't think of something else. What can we do here, right? It's okay to tell your child you weren't sure what the right outcome was and you're sorry that it worked out this way. Or that may have worked for me, but now it's not working in our day and age. So I guess we're on uncharted territory here. What can we figure out? And that helps your child realize that you're not also kind of against them, right? What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, it's just really about accountability for the other kid. Also, as well as both of them. But my thing is that sometimes, like I said, it's probably a last case scenario, and you tell them, hey, you know what, talk to them about it, or tell a teacher, tell a principal. But sometimes that doesn't get
sure.
Talk to the principal or to another teacher, and they don't see that.
Sure.
Whereas that might be like the last straw there.
Wait, I heard you about that, and we're going to get there. I'm going to cut you off, okay? Just for a second, because we could talk about this for 3 hours. I know, this is one of our favorite ones. So on the left, we've now figured out how to hear our child. We have let them talk about how they're feeling. We have maybe even said, how did it make you feel to do this? Did it give you any kind of power? Did it make you feel bad? How did you feel? Like you're getting in all that meat there. And then you get to your part. Okay, now we have to take some kind of action. And hopefully before you told anybody to punch anybody. But what kinds of things how would you take action from here? Because we know now the bullying hasn't been resolved and we've just sort of extended it. So what are we going to do with Darius? You're talking to your child. Try and hold yourself back from figuring out what should happen with the other kid. Now you're talking to your kid right now.
To find somebody he's safe with.
Say that again?
Find somebody he's safe with.
Yeah, okay, come up with a safety plan. That's a great strategy. You want to make sure, well, okay, where is this happening? Let's figure out, how can you make sure you have a buddy? Okay, and then maybe you want to talk to school again, right? And perhaps you feel like there's still work to be done, that Darius could have a conversation with a teacher he trusts, right? The more you can have a young person lead this with your backup support, the better. That means a little bit of work to kind of figure out where you're safe and where you feel like it's a safe risk to take. If you're unsure, you of course lean towards getting mental health support, getting support from the school directly. I'm not telling you not to call the school. I'm telling you to figure out how to also give your child power. So typically what you might do in this situation is have your child have a strategy to go tell a particularly trusted teacher. And meanwhile, what I would do is I'd send an email and say, Mr. So-and-so, Darius is coming to talk to you. Here's the situation. Please let me know if how it goes, right? Or have a phone call. Like, it's okay to back your child up, but you want to also give them opportunities to help build, okay?
This is pretty much, we could put our daughter's name in there. It's almost exact what happened. And she did not tell us that she was going to hit this kid or whatever.
Yeah.
What happened was he was picking on her on the bus, he was picking on her in the classroom, he was picking on her at the playground and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept telling the teacher, we kept telling the principal, she kept telling the teachers, principal, bus company, whatever, and nothing was happening.
Right.
So we didn't teach her self-defense. She went to through Girl Scouts she learned self-defense. So she did it herself. We didn't say nothing about getting in, nothing about doing whatever. But she felt that's what she needed to do because there was no other way out of the situation.
Right, and I'm sorry that we often get to the place where we feel really, really stuck, and that is what happens. We know that. Here's what we're trying to do now.
But we told her, well, how old is she now?
No, finish your sentence.
Not to do it again. She said self-defense is only Absolutely, it's the last resort.
Great, and that's sort of the same message we're hearing from a couple parents. And what I want to do is make you aware that there are going to be more options than there were previously, and that your school's been working on those, and that you can be an ally by connecting the right story, right? So anything you do here, making sure that you're doing exactly what you're doing and connecting, and then hopefully being able to give a little bit of trust that as this builds, you're going to see a huge difference. Unfortunately, we can't wave a magic wand and fix it right now anywhere across the country. And what the solution coach said, that it was 100% effective, is actually not the case, right? We do have a 90% success rate, but he was really pushing it a little with 100%. We will see a big change. We want to build that toolkit, and we want to figure out how we can work as a community. The other place that you can be involved too is thinking about how to help build these social emotional health in general. So the acts of kindness, all that other stuff. Let me keep doing a couple more scenarios, because I think we're going to recognize some more kids in these. Because these are scenarios that are happening everywhere. Brittany spends more and more time on Facebook and barely talks to you. That's being a teenager, right? Today in tears, she shows you her friend Michelle's wall, in which she lists the people that suck. Your daughter's name is at the top of the list. You tell Brittany to end her friendship with Michelle, and she replies that she cannot give up Michelle because then she would not have any friends. She begs you not to tell anyone. Left hand of empathy, right hand of action. What will you do?
Why would you need a friend like that?
Okay, so you are asking an investigative question, which is good. I want you to listen first. But before we get further, why can't she give up Michelle? Right, so the thing is about people is that triangle. Remember that yellow belonging piece of the triangle? People would rather be hurt than alone, right? If a child feels invisible or neglected, they will pick any attention, if an adult feels like that, over no attention and invisibility, right? That's sort of the tenet of many abusive relationships, right? So it's part of what we're structured as social beings, and so it's nearly impossible for her to give up Michelle with nobody else as backup. So us knowing that helps us think about our taking action. So how will we be empathetic? What are we going to do for that left hand of empathy?
Reach out, see if they can put somebody.
So you're taking action. You're taking action, which I appreciate because you're a caring parent. But before we take action, I want to do left hand of empathy. Yeah, we want to listen. We want to understand. I know this will be difficult for you, Michelle, or Brittany, whoever you are, right? Right, some of this, like that, I think I would feel that way too. Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling lonely? Are you, all those kinds of things. Then, what strategies would work? How will we talk her through this? And what kind of actions will you take as a parent?
Help her find other friends.
Yeah, and at the middle school level, it's probably a little easier to start directing friends, but you can be pretty strategic about what contact your kid has. And I would not be above being a little crafty around how to get access to other kids. What other after-school programs are there? What other things happening at your house can happen, right? Do you suddenly become the house where people come to play, right, or hang out? Do you get a game room, right? There's a lot of ways that you can be strategic about this. But what else? But what do we do right away?
Who knows? I mean, they might be, introverts. They might not be social.
Yeah. Sure. What else do we do though?
You could invite that Michelle over, so they can have a discussion.
Yeah, or talk to Michelle's parents, right? What do we not do? Please, please, please don't harass Michelle online. It may be so tempting. Maybe she has a bad perm, right? But please, it's so tempting to protect your child by sort of victimizing another person, but we got to build that toolkit, do something else. Also, try and get that down. You can let the school know. Please let the school know that this has happened, because it's likely, although the school isn't responsible for this exact moment, that they can help with your strategy about moving people around, or they would just like to know, so if something blows up at school, they'll be prepared and know the whole story. Okay, your 16-year-old son taunts Jose, your youngest son, with put-downs. You tried to stop this behavior in the past, but your 16-year-old always says, hey, it's just for fun. Jose seems tougher than he used to be and no longer cries. You get a call from Jose's teacher telling you that Jose is constantly putting down other students. How would you coach your sons through this? There's a name for this. What's this called?
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Yeah, it is cause and effect. But because they're siblings, it's called sibling bullying. It's kind of cool that it has its own little category. It also means it's incredibly common, right? These are kids who live with each other every day. There's conflict, and then sometimes it escalates into something like this, which is really, really, really tricky. So, left hand of empathy, right hand of action. What are you going to do?
Listen, I would take Jose, and I would say, hey Jose, let's go have some ice cream. The kid was bullying, and I would say, I would just ask simple questions like, so what's going on?
Okay,
And that's
so
where I would start. And then I would maybe give them some suggestions, and then we have a rule at character building and in our center shop that if you put somebody down once, you have to give them 3 put-ups. So, and I would maybe implement that at home.
okay, so you've done a bunch of things. You've sort of, and I know you couldn't all hear, but she took the one son out for ice cream to have a kind of independent conversation. She implemented strategies that worked in the after-school program that you're part of about coming up with ways to be kinder, right? And then coming up with sort of family rules. One thing I'd like to do with this one that's really, really critical is think about who your team is, right? Because this is very personal to you and you love both of these people. It's very hard to get perspective. So make sure that you have a bench, right? And your bench could be your faith-based institution. It could be your mother, although they're in it too, likely. It could be your best friend. It could be family counseling. Or if your office has, what is it called, EAP? Or something like that, the 3-time counseling thing you can call. Do you guys have that? Like, this is a great thing for that because you know you can probably resolve it, but this is a professional who has some good ideas that you could pick their brain. There's a lot of resources about this that would really, really help and would change the direction for both your kids. The other thing I'd like to recommend here is a family slogan. You want to do your family slogan before this gets here. But if you're already here, you can add it in. We know research shows that if you are really clear about the behavior you want to see in your family, and you keep using the statement, it's like our social vision statement, it helps people sort of see the castle, see where we're headed. We know that Walt Disney built the Disney World castle first, so everyone would have a vision of where they were headed. Many of you probably have a family slogan from your growing up. The ones I've heard from adults, I was just telling Kathy earlier today, all have curse words in them. I don't know, what was up with our parents? But you can do anything. So maybe it's the Brevorts work hard and are kind to each other, right? It's just sort of something you say that helps kids understand what to be versus we do a lot of what not to be, okay? Maybe it's the golden rule for your family. Yeah. So it could be anything like that, but using that can really give some grounding. It won't solve a situation, but it can help you have something to lean back on. Okay, now we've been talking all about left hand of empathy, right hand of action. Your daughter is sitting in the back of your car between 2 of her friends. She turns to her friend Rebecca. Do you think Francisco likes you more than me? Rebecca is silent, so your daughter continues. Francisco will never like you. You live in the worst neighborhood. You drop off Rebecca at her parents' house, and your daughter then turns to her other friend and says, Rebecca's clothes really suck. Where do you think she gets them? The Salvation Army? How would you coach, sorry to the employees of the Salvation Army that are here tonight. How would you coach your child through this?
That's not something we should say. That's not nice.
Yeah, you will abandon the nice left hand of empathy, right hand of action. You're going to put your foot on the brake and interrupt, right?
My daughter she got bullied a lot, and then she had a chance to turn it around. I'm like, we don't do this.
Right. And this is hard for kids to negotiate, right? The thrill or the possibility of being in a group and being liked is really, really compelling, and that's a good thing usually. But in a situation like this, it's incredibly hard. So we need to model how to interrupt, right? How to stop it. Hey, which kid is this? My daughter doesn't have a name in this. Hey, daughter, that's not okay. Here, or the reports are kind to each other, right? I don't care what you use, but stop it, explain, and then give some coaching around how do we be kind to each other? What can we do to resolve it? Maybe it's your 3 put-ups now that we've been unkind, okay? Questions about that scenario? When you get home, you can have your left hand of empathy, right hand of action story, but in the moment, please.
Tell her you'll stop the car and make her walk.
Well, I don't know what kind of situation. It's very, very cold in Minnesota from what I've experienced. So, unless your child has proper footwear, I do not recommend that. And I know a lot of teenagers and none of them wear proper footwear, ever. Okay, so we just talked about what your school's been doing, and I will talk a little bit more if you need me to about that. I gave you that handout. It has some really good ideas on it. It doesn't have an exhaustive list, but it's a start. The biggest message today is to think of yourself as a teammate. We really want the feedback to be collective, community and school, because the kids need the whole circle in order to thrive. What questions do you have for me?
One thing I haven't heard is directed solutions that are going to be instilled with initiatives from our school board, from our administrative staff. All I've heard is teachers that haven't yet been trained.
Oh, so I'm working separately.
One more
Okay.
question. And that did you say, paraphrase, that it starts with a culture, like an anti-bullying culture and a culture of inclusion? Is that kind of the first step when you look at those 4 steps?
We're building the culture. Yep, that's the first step, right? And then school.
If that's yes, then that's where I come back to those support roles and being able to make sure that those staff after this tomorrow are going to be supported through our financial resources and that they have the right training, not just tomorrow, but 3-year plan. Strategically, it can't be flavor of the month, it can't be the flavor of the year, it can't be Southwest, and it can't be the high school and then the separate
Yeah, so one of the things we're really working with the school on at the administrative level, and I can give you a little bit about it, is merging these ideas with other existing initiatives so that it's super clear how it all fits into one picture, because we know that bullying isn't the only issue that confronts our kids, right? And it's all a lesson in intersectionality, right? And so we're really working hard on figuring out how does this support what's already in existence and build on what's here. In the next time I come back, we're taking a look at the anti-bullying policy, which from what I have read is fairly good. And we're working on the protocol so that all the staff know where to move things and then where do the parents take things when they find them out. Right now, we have a path, and I just want to make sure it's super clear. But that's sort of the deeper coaching conversations that are happening at the leadership level.
So is there targeted dates and a timeline on when these things are going to happen?
They are happening. We haven't scheduled the next meeting because I'm here right now. We're working it out. But again, it's part of, I know that the conversations are happening at the district, and Kathy, you can talk a little bit more to that if you want to, but that's sort of my role in it. I know that you guys, that all the teachers and the administration have been really interested in moving this conversation.
When you have a large classroom, you have several children that are attention seekers, how is a teacher supposed to zone in one child being bullied? There's no time for all that.
So there's several things happening in that conversation, right? And not one strategy is going to work for all things. I will say that we are talking about anything that teachers do see, interrupting that so that we create a culture where that if anybody sees it, they can also interrupt, right? This will be most effective when anybody interrupts, so even other kids. And we actually heard at the middle school in the conversation that we had with some of the leadership team today, examples of where students were beginning to use the phrases that, and beginning to interrupt, and that teachers were reinforcing that with some of the tiger paws. Is that what they're called? Yeah. So it's beginning because it can't be one person, and we need to use a community. So teachers are thinking about how do they support each other as staff to do that. But this is a process. There's other things that teachers, I'm sure, will work on around classroom management. That's out of my league, right? That's not what I'm talking about today.
Accountability as far as, say for the bully, I was just having a conversation with one of the other parents, and I think sometimes the bully gets away because maybe the target has defended himself or maybe shoved the bully back, and then the teacher might see him and say, hey, you know what, now you're in trouble, while the bully walks free. I mean, how is the staff, I guess, gonna go about that? I mean, I'm not saying that, hey, both are, that he's right for standing up for himself, but sometimes that's all the target has. And I'm not saying violence or whatever the heck, but I guess once they leave these school doors, it's a survival type of thing outside the school doors.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are important in what you're saying. So one, you won't always know everything that's happened with the child who's stuck in the role of bullying if your child's being targeted, right? So it's really important to understand that there's confidentiality, so you really won't hear everything that's happening and all the actions that are happening. I know it's a small community and you guys have other relationships, and so that kind of can make things difficult and when you're sort of building that out. The other thing you mentioned is, okay, so my child got in trouble because their action got caught, but there was this other stuff that happened before that's not being acknowledged. So
I'm saying like stuff before, but just, hey, like you said, he might have walked by and gave him a nudge, a pretty hard nudge.
Yeah.
The kid is fed up and he's going to turn around and.
When we train the solution teams, we talk about the idea of being a provocative target, right? And we really work hard on what needs to happen to see the whole story and to have action taken on all these different levels with whatever capacity the school has in the moment. Now, that is a process and won't be perfect. But it's helpful if you know more about a story than the school knows about the story, or maybe your student's not telling you the whole story, right? There's a whole investigation that's typically taking place that is not able to be shared with everybody in the situation. And so the more you can be a team member and share what you do know, and then in some cases kind of go out on a limb and work with your child and trust that the rest is happening. In this situation, we're less concerned with punitive action for everybody and more concerned with restorative action for everybody. So when we look at the solution teams, we're going to find ways that they can be together and be kind to each other and be respectful of each other ahead of making sure that we've made all the tick marks, right? Because we know that that's the only way to move forward. And I do hear your concern that it hasn't been perfect in the past and that that's been very difficult. So I don't want to silence that. And I think that what you've experienced is common across many schools that are dealing with this. Not that that helps. Other questions? Did that help at all? Sort of a non-answer for you? Oh, I got that face.
I guess for me, I mean, it's talking, personal experience, and not that it's happened to my kids or anything, because I've always, tell my kids, hey, just be cool with everybody. Regardless of, gender or whatever the heck, race, religion, origin, it doesn't really matter. But it's just one
messy.
of my concerns, because you're not going to have a solution team out, once you finish high school. I think that's why it's always big to be nice to everybody. Be cool. I mean, regardless if they're different or not. I mean, and I think sometimes as parents, we kind of get caught up in our own lives.
I want to hit one thing you did say that's important. No, you won't have a solution team when you graduate, but we will have a toolkit. Oh, I know how to move a group of people differently, right? What's neat about the solution team that I didn't focus on, and I probably should have, is what it does is it helps everybody in the team realize their power, right? All of a sudden, they're part of the climate building in the school. Kids all over the school, if your kid's on a solution team, it's a good thing. It's because they want to be there. It doesn't mean that they're the kid in the bullying role, because there's a lot of great kids who are doing all pro-social things in that space. They're going to want to be on it because it's the place to get things done and to voice their own power. And it's really exciting. That's what they'll learn from the solution team that they'll take forward. They're going to take forward, I know how to lead an initiative. I know how to lead a project. I'm going to go change the world. That's what happens in this. And it has almost nothing to do with the original solution. Okay. Take from this that it's hard for adults to stand up, and we're really asking a lot of your young people. We're going to work hard to build their toolkit. We're asking a lot of you to kind of lean out and trust that we're doing something that's really successful across the country, and that restorative practice will build something amazing in all of your young people. And then be our partner. Have a lot of fun. I don't know if Kathy, if you want to close anything out. Thank you.
No, I want to thank the group of parents and community members who came tonight. Some of the staff here have heard Jennifer now a couple times, and our first reaction, I will tell you, was, ooh, she doesn't have this silver bullet. She has this team discussion. We have to kind of work together and figure it out. And I will tell you today, I watched two groups of staff talking through some things that when I first heard her present, I thought we'd have ready to go in week 2. Yeah, week 2. And we are week 9 almost past that now, past week 9. And we are not back at step 1, but we're about at step 2. On a much longer continuum. But it was a great discussion today to see here what some teachers are doing here at Southwest and what some teachers are doing at the high school. And we know we have a lot of work to do, and we haven't even begun the solution team. We're still working on this concept of interrupting kids as grown adults, stepping in and saying, Jennifer, what I heard you say to Max today sounded really hurtful. You need to stop that and let's move on to class. Max, anything else you want to say to me? I mean, we have staff who have those skills and we have staff who don't have those skills. And then the concept of listening to some 7th grade teachers today talk about their kids calling out other kids after 9 weeks, because this small group of teachers have started to use this consistently. And even 2 teachers who were jokingly teasing each other, one of the kids said, be nice, because in Siberian, or whichever group it was, we're nice to each other, Mrs. So and Mrs. So. And they knew the kids were teasing, but they could use that skill in that moment. And it's hard to work through some of these skills as adults. And if you came tonight thinking, oh, she's going to give us the list of things to say, that's part of it, but I'm listening and I didn't get your name, but be kind. This is what you tell your kids.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you
every day.
My dad always used to say it like, it doesn't cost you anything to be nice.
And that's ultimately what this is about, is be kind every day. I texted, while I'm listening to her today, I texted my 3 daughters, do you remember what we talked about in our family? And they're all grown adults out of the house. And they all 3 texted me back kind of jokingly, kill them with kindness. And to those who've been given much, much is expected. They heard that growing up. And they're 29 and 23 years old, so that's building that. And we, by far, weren't perfect parents at all. But there are some things you can do internally that might seem small to you, but in the long run, be kind.
I guess just to babble it out off this meeting, I think sometimes culture takes a part of it. I mean, I grew up, obviously Mexican culture, hey, you grow up tough. you know. But like I said, you know, my dad would tell me, is like, just be nice to everybody. Or like he would say, is like, hablándose, arreglen las cosas, you know, talking is how you can figure stuff out. But sometimes cultures kind of get in the way to where you can't sit down and talk about feelings and stuff like that, where it's just action. It's just, you know, yeah, you can try to find a solution, but if you can't find a solution, sometimes it's just action you might just have to have. And I'm not saying to go out and fight or violence is the answer, but, you know, and like I said, there needs to be a support system, not only at home, but at school, you know, and outside of school, as far as like a club or your friends and stuff like that. It's just, it can just be really hard sometimes, because,
Yeah.
you know, parents might be working, they're not there, you know, stuff like that.
And all of that is really, really valid and important, and we're giving the message at school that these are strategies, and so I think it's awesome that families are coming out to hear what this new thinking is, sort of outside of our own shared histories or different histories, and that's important. This model began in San Francisco, in some pretty challenging schools, where they did a lot of work around different cultures represented in those spaces. I'm happy to talk more about the research around that if you like, and sort of navigating places where culture looks really different from here. And it sounds to me like this is a changing community as well, and what that's all about, and that's that mess. I would love to be involved in conversations about that as well.
And just some other things that we have been working, we worked last year with NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and came in and talked with our teachers about suicide prevention and what to look for and what kinds of things. And we're reviewing some of those pieces now. And some of the strategies that presenter Kay King talked with staff about is, if you think a student is depressed or a colleague is depressed, or if you think that this is they are looking at attempting to take their own life, you can interrupt that for 5 minutes and make a lifelong difference. And many of the staff talked with Kay afterwards, almost in disbelief. Not that not that person would need more assistance and more help, but to think that for 5 minutes I could make a difference in that person's life. And there's a story on NPR this week about a doctor who told a story after 30 years where his colleagues interrupted his life. And so sometimes be kind, interrupt somebody for 5 minutes. There are beginning solutions that are simple, that we might think, ooh, I don't know if I can do that. So then, how do you interrupt that? How do we interrupt bullying? How do we interrupt somebody who's got some other serious issues in their life? We also brought down a speaker from the Department of Education this week to work with our English language teachers and our success coaches, and our instructional coaches and our principals on what are we doing about building the skills of our EL students, our multilingual students, to keep their culture, to keep their native language, to learn English. And we tend to focus on learning English and we leave out these other things and the strength of keeping students multilingual. Well, if we think about the incident in our community this last few weeks, it is multifaceted. It is dealing with cultures that may look different than me. It is dealing with issues of bullying, and conflict, and it is dealing with preventing suicide and providing support. Nothing is simple, and I wish we could, talk about the timeline. We're talking about, when is she coming in? And we know that this organization is going to be working with New Richmond, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva schools, and we know that there's lots of community things we need to be doing. So we don't have all the answers, and I've learned so much in the last 2 years that after 34 years of teaching, I didn't learn that, and so we're constantly growing here. So I know I've had phone calls with some of you. I recognize you here. Some of you are former students, and so thank you for coming. And we do want to honor your time, and if some of you have some individual questions you want to talk with Jennifer, we're going to allow that here at the end.
And please do the evaluations too, so we can really hear what else is needed, what did you appreciate, so we can make sure we customize this for communities like yours as we move around.
So thank you.
Thanks very much. Nice to meet all of you.